Well, our listeners are in for a treat with this episode for sure. It's going to be different than what we've had in the past. And we have a lot of district administrators, school administrators, and possibly vendors who will be listening to this, and they may have interest in Purchase Pros. And so today we'll be diving into the history of Purchase Pros and what that offers. And who better to explain this service and this organization offers so much than the architect of this Purchase Pro system. Sam is our Chief Business Officer here at KEDC with Purchase Pro, so districts have worked with him. And Mark and Sam have an extensive history together, partnering and working together, but then also with all of our districts and different states as well, because of all the support you give districts and schools in the area of construction and procurement and bidding and all things facilities that people may know about or they may not know about and they need to know about in serving districts. So this time today, we're going to record and we're going to hit probably a lot of surface knowledge because these two gentlemen have forgotten more than a lot of people will know about facilities and construction. And so we hope that our listeners take away content, information that will benefit them to serve in their districts, the schools, or as a vendor supporting the work that's going on for students. So can you tell our listeners just how do you see yourself keeping students as a priority in the roles that you serve in?
I'll start. I've been doing this, I guess, with KDC now I've been at KDC over 27 years. I've probably been doing this for probably 18 to 20 the last several years. And we struggled with that at the start, because we're not directly impacting students. We're not in the classroom. We don't work directly with teachers. We don't directly with students. But what we kind of finally settled on and came up with, and it's kind of fit us ever since, is that our thing is to take things off the plates of administrators so they can focus on their primary mission. Their primary mission is education and students, not procurement and bidding. So if we can take that off their plate, if we can help them do that piece, then that's frees them up, gives them more time to do the thing that they're passionate about, which is working with the kids.
Wonderful. Thank you. Mark, how do you keep students as a priority in your role?
Well, first, I'd like to tell you thank you for having me today. It's an honor and pleasure. Always good to be with Sam. So I think I would begin with facilities impact learning. And I actually have a paper that's on the website. If you're interested, you can look at this. But there's a lot of research, both nationally and even internationally, of the impact of facilities on learning. That's everything from lighting and air quality, comfort, safety, and also recognizing that in that is the opportunity that the facility can be a teaching tool. And that's not just an opinion, because KRS 157-455, Efficient School Design, the General Assembly has actually recommended those types of things. So I think anytime you're doing improving facilities, has a direct impact on students and staff. And I think, as Sam mentioned, for us to be able to help administrators take things off their plate so they can focus on essentially keeping facilities from being a barrier to learning. That's really would be a goal.
Well, the students in Kentucky and all the states that you partner with do have the best, keeping them in mind. You have an extensive amount of tools for folks. I'm going to put in the show notes in what you were talking about, like just guiding through all the different parts, but you also offer services and you're really linking national partners, state partners to districts, rural, urban, and around the long range facilities plans. Can a lot of our listeners can relate to that. And really, every year we have to think about how are we going to improve our facilities. That is regulation. But maybe I'm a new administrator. Maybe I don't know much about facilities, or maybe I have one staff and we have rural districts, urban districts that have different faculty and their needs. And maybe, how do you two come in play with the long range plans for districts when you're thinking about Purchase Pros, KEDC, Kentucky Education Development Corporation? Well, so how does all this play together?
Kind of a joint venture between us, KEDC, and 6 of the other educational cooperatives across the state. So we all participate together. The work is done through KDC. So we're sort of the DBA of Purchase Pros. We've expanded, like we said, now, and we're about 20 states. We're over 1,000 members and probably around 400 different vendors, and across all categories beyond just facilities. So it's probably good to start with that, just about who exactly Purchase Pros is. And then facilities is one piece of what we do.
Great.
I think that's important. And then, our side of that, a lot of times Mark kind of figures out, okay, how does it fit? And then our job is to, once he identifies the venue, then we try to put together a project or put together an RFP or a bid document, whatever the case would be, that to help meet those needs. But, it's kind of in consultation with Mark that we make that happen.
And what is the RFP?
Sorry, request for proposals.
Proposals?
Or an invitation for bid or request for proposals.
Okay. So getting different vendors together for a project.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Right. Do you have anything else you'd like to add to that? Heroes Partners.
So first thing for school administrators and finance people is they know that the various finance mechanisms available, including capital outlay, building fund, and school facilities construction commission, there is a compliance issue for use of those funds, and that's tied to the district facility plan. So that's real important for both districts and vendors to understand. If the vendor is marketing a roof project and a school district wants to do it and they want to use capital funds, we spend time with the vendors to make sure they understand that intentional connection has to be made. So just from a finance standpoint, it's important to understand the facility plan. But the facility plan is a 4-year plan that's required by statute and regulation, and it's a complex process, and we do help people with facilitating that at some point, not as directly as a facilitator, but certainly as giving them technical support. But it's really only one part of the facility effort. So we talked a little bit about things like maintenance and operations and budgeting. So what is a good general fund budget for operation in a district? Well, there are some metrics for that, and I'm trained to kind of know, depending on the size of the district, how many facilities they have, what's a good number for that. I think at some point, the relative condition of your facilities is a metric that can affect what that budget might be. So there's a lot of things that go hand in hand. The long-range plan is kind of the outcome of a lot of strategic work by the architects and the community people. It's community-based and ultimately approved by the local Board of Education, State Board of Education, and becomes the trigger for utilizing capital funds. But there's also overlaps between local operations and how that can work. So I think one of the things that I try to do, in addition to making sure there's an intentional connection, understanding the financing, helping the vendors, is also to maybe fill in some of those gaps for people when they need help there.
So they may have on their facility plan, they need to replace a building, but that doesn't mean that there's necessarily funds to replace that building.
Right. So a lot of things will be driven by cost. Sometimes, again, it depends on your capacity, but at some point this might be too far, but depending on the number of priorities that you establish, at some point you need to look at your ability to do those projects, right? And you may realize, well, we need to make some changes. Either maybe we're going to renovate a building instead of build new. If we have that as an option, maybe we need to consider our revenue and our existing debt service. So a lot of things go in. The execution of the plan is another whole gamut of things. So a caution to school administrators is, hey, it's wonderful to have a long-range district facility plan, if you have a good one especially, but making sure that at some point you have some sense of the time frame for execution and how you're going to do it.
So we see a lot of times local boards having to add a nickel to our taxes to come into the schools to be able to purchase these types of facilities and make the long-range plans.
That's a good point. I think the revenue, in the beginning, the Kentucky Education Reform Act is something that I hope people understand how revolutionary and amazing that was as a national movement. We were the first states to go through what they call the equity lawsuit. If you're in other states, the Supreme Court ruled that our educational system was not constitutional. And the reason for that was basically it was built on the equity and adequacy model established in Section 18 of the Kentucky Constitution. So in simple terms, what does all that mean? It means that a student that may be in an underserved community should have the same opportunities as, or at least similar or equitable opportunities as in wealthy districts. That is a big deal. That is a huge deal. And the General Assembly, actually, the Facility Support Program of Kentucky, for instance, is sometimes referred to as the nickel with equalization, is really built to provide additional funding resources to districts that otherwise wouldn't have them. So I think that's really, really distinguishes Kentucky on a national level, is that you can go into, some of the districts that have 100% free and reduced lunch or underserved. They might be District 40. They might be whatever, and find great facilities, great technology. It's not wonderful. We haven't solved all the problems yet, but we have done a lot to move our state to where facilities really provide a great opportunity for students. They're there the better part of the day for many, many years. A lot of their memories about education will come from being in facilities. And again, facilities are only one component of the Education Reform Act. There are many components, but preschool, kindergarten, technology, so and so, so and so. But I think it's real important to understand historically how important the Reform Act was and is. Now we're 35 years later, and there obviously are things that are being discussed and probably need to be discussed. Local control, as you mentioned, is always a politically correct thing to do, but oftentimes local control can, or at least sometimes can, lead to a lack of equity and adequacy. Does the General Assembly feel they need to do something about that? That's up to the General Assembly. But I think the original premises of the Education Reform Act, all the funding mechanisms were really built around models with real metrics and real estimates. And the idea was that students would be able to have equitable and adequate opportunity no matter where they lived.
So with that in mind, thinking about the links that you bring together, Mark, what was the light bulb moment for you to come to this facilities system that we have that you've been serving districts with for all of these years?
Well, I need to start by not taking too much credit for any of that. I think the vision actually came from leadership in the cooperatives, and that vision was that we could find alternative methods of delivery that could be effective, maybe more effective than conventional processes. And so I think we should start with, again, efficient school design, because in efficient school design is something that they refer to as sustainability, long-term serviceability, which is ultimately lower operations costs, and it's more efficient economically, but it's more efficient in every way. So what does that mean? Well, it means that you recognize, first of all, that this all happens in time. So a building's life essentially is about 30 years. That's kind of the benchmark in the Kentucky Planning Manual. The debt service for a new facility is 20 years. So once you get a new building or a major renovation paid for, you've got 10 years to kind of save up for when it's going to need major renovation again. So it's a cycle. So when they say life cycle, that's what they mean by that. If you do, everything that we do in Purchase Pros is built on a best value proposition, and we are focused on life cycle cost and long-term sustainability. So what does that mean? Well, it means that we have the highest quality products delivered by the highest quality contractors for a fair price. Now, at the beginning, if you do everything on a price-based model, can you do it cheaper? The answer going in is probably can. Can you do it
on the front end?
On the front end. Make that clear. Initially on the front end. But over time, the concept of life cycle costing and long-term sustainability is more than words. How about this? How about a roof system that doesn't have a 20-year warranty, which is required by regulation as a minimum standard, and then one that might have a 35-year warranty, and actually be able to perform at that level? And you got to remember, just because you have a warranty doesn't mean that it's going to be that doesn't guarantee proper service every day. What the warranty guarantees is that if the roof fails or you have a leak, that they'll come and fix it. It doesn't say how long it's going to take them to fix it. It doesn't tell you how much hassle that's going to be. And then it's kind of like a car. If it's breaking down periodically and you have a warranty and it's in the shop all the time, is that a good thing? Well, not really, especially if you're trying to educate students, right? So I think the serviceability part, that's more than just a word. Sustainability is more than just a word. It really refers to higher quality. It refers to products and systems that last longer and perform at a higher level. And so that's really where we've kept our focus, is in that, I'm going to call it a niche market, also recommended by the General Assembly. So we're not making this stuff up. And bringing that to people who are, quote, smart buyers, who recognize that we're going to be in these buildings for a long time. This isn't going to be a 5 to 7 year deal like a private developer. This is a building we're going to keep in service maybe for 100 years. So we really need to be thinking about the quality of what we're doing. Maybe we need to save up another 10% or whatever, so we can go in with a system that's going to last a lot longer. So I think that's a big focus that we've done. And then I guess also let that be driven by the superintendents and school leaders. So we're not just running out and doing packages because we think we should do packages. Superintendents come to us and say, we need a different way to deliver roofs, and we work on roofs. If they say we need gym floors, we work on gym floors.
Energy.
So we want to make sure that the things that we create actually are used, but we're also keeping our focus on a process that yields best value. And what does that mean? That means that we're scoring performance. So the difference between a price-based world, which is traditionally done, is that that's basically a low bid operation. You may get a contractor who's qualified or maybe not qualified. That is a risk. And so our focus is minimizing risks by using best value and expertise. That's pretty much simple.
So could you get a roof cheaper than what we can probably provide one from one of our vendors? Absolutely. Are you going to get the same quality of roof that's going to last? Who knows?
And the time thing is really important, because you say, okay, so what? So here's an example. So when you put a roof system on and you do the usual, I'm going to say, not to pick on systems, but say a single ply system with a 20-year warranty, just remember what's going to happen when you have to say it lasts 20 years. How much is it going to cost to replace that roof in 20 years? It's going to be double or triple, at least, maybe 4 times. Who knows? We don't know what the economy is going to do. The point being is, every time you replace it, it's a huge expenditure. So the example I always give is, so we have 2 systems. We have the Purchase Pro system versus the kind of usual thing that goes in schools with a 20-year warranty. In the beginning, let's just, for the sake of discussion, say the Purchase Pro's roof is 15% more on the front end. So if it's $1 million roof, say it's $1,150,000. The school board looks at that and they go, well, $150,000 is a lot of money. We're not going to spend that. We're going to do the $1 million thing. Okay, so 12 years later, maybe 15, but I've seen some that don't last 12. I've been on them. You have to replace that roof system. So how much is it going to cost to replace that roof system? It's going to be at least $2 million. It's going to be double. So let's say it's $2 million, just to be conservative. So now I got $3 million in the project, in that roof. The Purchase Pro's roof, thank you very much, we're working just fine. Let's go another 15 years. Our roof system has to be replaced again. They do the same thing. So now, let's say that's $4 million. So now I got $4 million, $2 million, and $1 million. I got $7 million in that roof system. Our roof system's still under warranty, performing fine. With a little bit of maintenance, we can probably extend that warranty 10 years. So who's the smart buyer now? They passed on for $150,000, they passed on a potentially $6 million shortfall, and they don't have a roof that's going to perform at a high level every day and be maintained by the person that's warranting it. So at some point, what's the best value? We maintain, I believe, that if you can manage it, and some people can't, but if you can manage the addition, if it's more, and sometimes we've been less. So it depends. One of the other things that I think we bring in a best value proposition is the contractor and expert builders involved in the solution. With all due respect to architects, sometimes those builders who are actually going to build the roof and warranty it can find value in existing assets that otherwise might get thrown away, i.e., got a 20-year roof, it's leaking, so we tear it off and put in a new roof. What if that insulation, a majority of it's still good? The insulation's the most expensive part of a roof. That's something sometimes even architects don't understand. So we had a project and we replaced the roof system. The expert vendor went in, said we can save the better part of the insulation. They had a $1.3 million estimate. We came in at $1,300,000 less with a better system that's going to last probably 20 years longer. It's not always that good, so I don't want to talk about price as being that we're always going to be better. But I think life cycle costs, there's no doubt in my mind that better systems up front. Same thing for HVAC. And I think those two systems, if I'm a school administrator and I don't know a whole lot about facilities, roofs and HVAC, I always said those are things, if you want the Rolls Royce, go for it, because those are places where they can shut your building down. Those are things that tend to be maintenance headaches. And those are two things that you really want to get right.
That makes sense. So thinking about this process that you offer for districts that you just described, can you talk about your approach and what's the process and procurement and what is that? And just for anyone who may not know, or maybe we have some listeners that really know this. So can you kind of take us through that process of what do they get when they're partners with you?
So I think we talked a little bit earlier just about kind of our process. So when the district identifies something where they think we could fit, and we usually hear that from superintendents, facilities folks. Here's a need we've got, a pain point of ours. What can you do to help? Typically at that point, we'll talk to Mark. We usually look to the experts, like Mark mentioned before. So you'll talk to the manufacturers, talk to the big vendors in the field, who are the people that maybe we could work with, kind of just gathering information to start, and then figure out is it something we can put a package together that works. Not everything fits for what we do, and we know that. So not everything's going to lend itself to this. We've looked at particular systems in the past. It's just difficult to do. There's too many moving parts. There's too many different configurations that can happen. They're all vary by district to district. Sometimes those are not a good fit. You'd think maybe they would be, you could come up with something, but it just becomes a problem with so many different iterations, so many different systems out there that it's hard to do. So if we can find a good fit and we think it's a good fit, then we typically work with Mark, and we can bring in outside architects, we can bring in outside engineers to help put together those specifications. Get those specifications together, we put them on the street. Once we've got those specifications out, we get responses back, and then we're going to evaluate those. Typically, it's a joint venture with us and Mark to do those evaluations.
And that's what the package is.
That's what the package, right?
Okay.
So we take that request for proposal. When we take the responses that we get back, we evaluate those, and we'll make awards. Typically, we'll make more than one award in most categories. We've got more than one vendor. So the districts still have some choice in this. And when the district's ready to execute a project, they can skip that piece, having to go out to do their own invitation for bid or their own RFP. They can move straight to a project. So it shortens the time frame for them because we've done that work up front, and they're using the procurement vehicle that we've already established and the contracts we've already established. So that's a time saver for sure for them. Like I said, and they still have choice in vendors, so they can look at, who's out there in the field. If we've got, 6 different roofers, then they can look and say, well, who's closest to us? So if we have an issue that we know they're close to come back, they can say who's not close to us because maybe we've had an issue with them in the past, and we'd like to look around and see who else is out there. And like Mark said, it's the best value proposition, so they don't have to take the lowest cost. And the good thing, what we've done with most of our, especially like with roofing and like sports fields and some of those areas, we've established kind of the maximum price with the RFP. So they can't go above that when they're given a price, but they could still sharpen their pencil, if they're in a situation where they, depending on what's involved with the job, what they're seeing, how much work they need at that point. So the vendor could come back and give us a price that's better than what they gave us, kind of in the price that they established with the RFP. As long as they don't go above that, then they're okay. And we've had some districts that have taken advantage of that. They've requested multiple quotes from multiple vendors for a roof project or things like that, and that's fine. The vendors understand that that's the market, and they're more than willing to participate in those situations.
It would be a relief for me if I was in the district's shoes, to have your experience and your contacts for this process.
I think Sam said it well. The big difference in what we do is we utilize first of all, we have the request of what's needed from the school leaders, but then we utilize the expertise of the contractors to make sure that we're covering the things that need to be covered. And we're also, sometimes that process is about what unit prices need to be developed and the guaranteed maximums. We want to make sure we cover all the bases for all different kinds of roof systems. So I think we have 360 unit prices maybe on one, but we let them decide if there's a area where we can get the larger the roof, the less it should be per square foot. Well, where are those break points? Well, the contractors tell us. And so we're getting direct feedback on the front end, not on the receiving end. And that really helps us strategically for both for our best value, for our metrics, for our contractor qualifications and so on. We're getting that on the front end. And I think the other thing that there's a lot of things that we do, but, take roofing, for instance, we have kind of covered the state regionally. So if you're in West Kentucky in the Purchase area, there's a roofer in Murray, Kentucky. And I think that's important sometimes is the serviceability. Is my contractor, for instance, in that same, not to sound the wrong way, because there are good roofers in Lexington too that do great service and we have them on our, but if someone has to travel all the way from Lexington to Callaway County, what kind of service are you going to get? Well, you'd hope you'd get great service. In that case, if there is a preferred vendor who's in the region that the district has direct knowledge of, and usually we've scouted that as well, and that's the same thing is true for really all of our venues, is to make sure that whether we have multiple contractors or a single contractor, can we really service projects all over the state with this particular vendor? And I think the answer is yes. We had great customer satisfaction. I think that's really the measure of have you done well? Do people like what they have gotten? Would they do it again? And now we're getting repeat customers and we're growing that business too.
There's 2 or 3 things just thinking through this. One is just because we rely on the vendor's expertise to help put together the package, doesn't mean we ask the vendors to put together the package.
That's true.
Mm.
I mean, that's a no-no. So they don't actually write the specs or anything like that. We just kind of go to their expertise to make sure that we've covered everything that needs to be covered. And we solicit their input to make sure that we've done that. So I think that's important. The other thing, talking about local vendors, and it's not just in facilities, but in all of our things, we recognize that local vendors support local communities.
Mhm.
So if you've got a roofer in your area or a sports field company or some of our other venues and that's in your area, we know that as a district you want to support those folks who support your ball teams and support your kids and have kids in your schools and they're sit on your school boards, and so we're cognizant of that, and we know that's important to schools. So we want to make sure that we recognize that as we move forward.
In a best value proposition, you really have to do all of that. You have to do utilizing the contractor's expertise in the issue and looking at roofing and looking at bleachers and some other things that we do. We pay for the architect services and they do the specifications just like local districts do. The difference is we get that added information that we get from the contractor that might cause extra buildability. It might cause lesser cost. It might cause a better quality. It's a best value proposition that way. So we're doing that on behalf of the school district, which also takes time. And Sam mentioned the time, but just real quick on a school roof project, the processes would be you'd have to first solicit proposals for architectural service. That takes time. Then you have to review that and award that. That probably could take a month, 6 weeks. Then you have to do the drawings and specification. That takes probably 90 days, 120 days. Add that to a bidding process, it takes another 30, and then evaluation of that. And it could be quite a long time before you start work on a roof. What if your roof's leaking right now? You still got to go through that process. In our process, the roofer's already procured. They can go to the site, offer the number. If it's accepted, they could begin work maybe in a week's time. If they want to have architectural services to do those plans, they can be done in conjunction with ordering the roof system. Also, we have the roofer there so they could patch the holes for the things that they just need to do to keep the building in service. So that time frame thing is a big deal. It's not like a couple of weeks or 3 weeks. It's probably going to take, on a 6 to 8 month roofing job, it could take, 3 months off of that, maybe. Might cut it and, it's really big time. Plus you can start work immediately. So, and I guess the important thing is it's not all about being able to take advantage of that time frame. That's only one thing. Remember all the other things we tried to cover, right? We tried to cover quality. We tried to cover the performance aspect of the contractor and the products. We've already done the procurement. So there's a lot of benefits that way that I think really help districts get where they need to. The time frame, cost thing, each of those have to be looked at on an individual basis, but there's always going to be a big time savings.
And we use roofing a lot for examples just because they're easy for people to get their head around. But we do have other venues outside of roofing.
Some of them are a lot more complicated that, require multiple contractors and services, HVAC equipment, controls, lighting. And those things can be, if the time frame can really, really get long in a conventional design bid build and can be very foreshortened. And in those cases, we believe that the cost really does work toward the school district's favor, that the time frame of a conventional process costs more. And we've actually have data to demonstrate that it's rather shocking how much less HVAC systems cost when you do them in a shorter time frame. In that situation, I think we get to have our cake and eat it too. We get to have long-term serviceability and life cycle costing and actually guaranteed performance. How about that? You don't get that at all in a design, bid, build HVAC project, but you get guaranteed performance. You get all of those things and you get it for less cost.
So you talked about different facility items, different aspects of the facility. Playgrounds is something that I have some experience in. So can you tell our listeners about, PTO or PTCs, raising funds for a new playground altogether or one piece of equipment? How does Purchase Pros work with that?
So we've got contracts with different playground vendors. They're not technically part of the facilities packages that we do in consultation with Mark, but we do have contracts in place with several of the different major vendors. They're available not only for playgrounds, but if it's bus parts, if it's milk for your cafeteria, we've got contracts in a lot of different spaces. Playgrounds being one of those. And so if you're looking for those, we can point you toward the purchasepros.net website, and there's the links out there to their contracts and their contacts both, so you can get that information. If it's a district, funded project, then you've got to follow model procurement rules. If it's a PTA sort of funded project, things are a little murkier. With that, I mean, they're more than welcome to use those contracts as far as the purchase. But it's just sort of on them at that point, I think, depending on what the local district requirements are.
So we really took it from long range planning, which are many years out, planning for large projects, down to even a piece of equipment or milk containers or what did you say? You said
Bus parts.
Bus parts. I mean, very, very targeted products as well.
Books for the we've got vendors that do Chromebooks. We've got vendors that do. We've not really dabbled much in computers because there were state contracts for computers for several years. It's one of the areas that we're looking at. If it's a need that the districts have identified that we could help, we'd be glad to do that. We're always looking to the districts to come to us and say, hey, look, here's a problem. Here's a pain point we've got in procurement. What can you do to help us?
And how does that help a school or a district to partner with you on, let's say, like bus parts or a playground equipment?
There's rules in model procurement, so a district can't spend over $40,000 in a specific category in a given year, and that's across all the schools in the district. So if your district's of any size at all, you're probably going to run up against that threshold pretty quickly in a lot of categories. And so you've got to keep that in mind, and then you have to move to a formal procurement. You can no longer use kind of a small purchase process at that point. So we can fulfill that procurement piece. We can do an invitation for bid and award contracts that then the districts would have access to purchase through. So that's typically kind of where we fit with the district. Now, you still have to follow your local procurement rules, even with what we've got in place. Some districts still want folks to go out and get 3 quotes. So you need to contact 3 playground vendors and get 3 quotes from 3 different people. Some districts, it's enough that if they're on the contract and the person been on the dollar threshold, that you can just move straight to a purchase. So it really comes back to what the local requirements are when you're making a purchase.
Great.
That would be like a board policy, right? And I think so there's kind of a minimum standard for procurement, and then there might be a policy or best practice to go beyond that, and then their actual execution. I think the other thing that's important, maybe, they've got, I think, furnishings and all kinds of things that go in the schools that are not fixed equipment. So those library furnishings, cafeteria, whatever, desks and chairs, all kinds of stuff like that. But the other part of it, hopefully, is I sometimes become a communicator. Like we had this come up. We had a PTA wants to do a playground. They're raising money, but this is for special needs kids with autism. Well, that's a whole other interesting thing. So how about a vendor that can provide those design services and actually go to the PTA and talk to them about different things they might consider, some they might know about, some they might not know about, like tactile learning opportunities, so and so, so and so. And then once they kind of have that, here's what we need, then they know how much money they need to raise, and then they know they can purchase the playground through one of the vendors. So I think, again, that whatever architectural aspects, if there are any things you might want to consider, I'm a resource at that point. So where I might not be directly involved in, say, library furnishings or whatever, sometimes technology, there's overlaps between what's fixed equipment as part of the building and what's really considered furnishings and equipment.
And we've had districts come to us before and say, can you help us? We've got, we're doing a construction project. We've got X number of dollars left here at the end and we want to do furniture. Can you help us do a bid package? And we've helped them put together a bid package just for that specific school. Typically, we'll go back to our current vendors on contract first. But we do put it out just kind of to the wide world, and anybody that wanted to respond could respond to that. But we have helped hit districts with that as well.
Auditorium seating.
Auditorium seating. Yeah.
It's a lot to think about with schools and districts, a lot of pieces. So you've given a good explanation of, it's really a bird's eye view of kind of just the partnership. We could go into hours and probably we'll follow up with more episodes on this content in the future. But just for our listeners in your journey through all this work, what are you most proud of?
I think and it's one of the contract spaces we've not talked a lot about is our guaranteed energy savings contracts. I think that's one that we should be very proud of. I think we changed kind of the landscape in Kentucky about how guaranteed energy projects are delivered. With what we've done, that we kind of took it from vendor-driven to owner-driven. I think that's a really important change that we've seen. And it's not just through our contracts, even districts that want to go out and do their own bids now are adopting our model to do their own bids. And so the vendors that maybe didn't want to participate with us are still having to follow that same model when they work with some of those districts that want to go out on their own.
It's a great model, a guideline.
Yeah, to follow up on that, I think the transparency in the procurement that we brought to the process was key. And the best value, always, you're going to find transparency. And it's not really or maybe I should say it this way, it's really true that the industry actually changed their model in Kentucky. We went from a operation where the vendors dominated the conversation, where they decided what the systems were going to be, how much the systems were going to cost, who the contractors were going to be, what kind of profit they were going to make. All of those things were pretty much left up to the vendor, and they just kind of put it out there for the school system, and that was it.
That's what you have to do.
In our situation, we really moved that to a really transparent, and they can use local contractors. They can pick the system that they want, and they know that the overhead is going to be very comparable to their typical design to build. So that's a huge thing. It's really improved the quality of that operation and cost, really, of that operation. Maybe to kind of piggyback on that, I think at the end of the day, we go back to the original vision of this whole facility operation, which was to provide services to schools. And at some point, if you're fortunate enough, and we were blessed to be able to do that, I think the other part of it is you have to pay for that and sustain it. You have to have a business model that works. So we think we have a really good business model. And I think when you look at if you're doing best value, are you really doing best value? I think you have to go back to the services that we provide and look at the overall delivery at the end of the day. Does that from alpha to omega really make sense from a business standpoint? And I would argue it really does. So, being able to sustain a facility, a high quality facility, consulting, communication, research, training, all of that, and be able to, and we have services where we actually can help people with real projects and high quality vendors, those people, keeping those people in the school market where they might otherwise leave because they don't want to be in a low bid situation. I think that's really important. I think it's really been healthy. At some point, this may sound a little hokey, but I think it's really good for the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Those high-quality vendors are working for schools. They're bringing high-quality roofs to schools where they might not otherwise work, where lower-quality contractors who are doing low bid might be getting all the work. Those people have been attracted back into the market. They don't mind competing against each other because they're peers, but they don't want to be in a low bid situation. So I think the being able to sustain the service, being able to kind of bring these disparate pieces together into a holistic approach to provide the services that schools need, I think that would be the thing that I'd be most proud of.
And you have seen the majority of school facilities upgrade or be constructed in your career, haven't you? A lot to be proud of, both of you. What are you most excited about for the future of facilities in Kentucky?
Well, that's a tough one. I think one of the things that we always have to keep our pulse on, and KEDC and Sam didn't talk a whole lot about the technology services, but technology services are a big part of, and I'm sure he can do that here, is, one of the things that's really, we're really in a changing world. School buildings largely over the past, even 50 years haven't changed a whole lot. Yeah, we have library media centers. Yeah, we have tech spaces. But overall, we're in a world where things are changing so fast. The things that we're teaching our kids and the careers that we're trying to help them get into might not even be around 2 years from now. So I think a real challenge is trying to keep the pulse of what school, what does that mean in real life? Well, it means buildings need to be flexible. It means that we need to really be thinking about changes we might need to make to a building to incorporate a career 2 years from now that might not even be around right now. So we need to really be thinking ahead. We need to have a vision. This isn't like a standard model that we can just put in place and stamp them out like a factory because of the changes. And the technology is a big part of that. So I think keeping pulse of that in a way that's exciting. I think when things are changing, if everything's the same, we can just stamp them out. And there was a day in the General Assembly where they actually wanted model plans and they wanted to stamp them out because it was cheaper to do that. But we would never have done the innovative things like geothermal, net zero energy, whiteboard technology, wireless hubs. All of that stuff came because each time we went out to build a school, we tried to build it better. And I think that's something that we should always keep. Hopefully, they'll keep as a model in Kentucky for all the great things that have been accomplished here. And hopefully, that's something I'd be excited for in the future. If you look at new schools now, they're exciting to go into. They're exciting places. They're kids, they go in there like, hey, this looks like college. I'm like, they are collegiate, and I think laboratory spaces and kids learning in teams, individual learning plans, all those things at some point have impact on the facilities and the spaces that we create for learning. So I'm always excited about that kind of thing. That's, being an architect, I guess I couldn't help.
Well, my background before I got into this role was in technology, so I think it's important. As far as what we might be most excited about in the future, I could see artificial intelligence is probably going to change the game in a lot of places. I don't think we actually know yet exactly. So that's a little exciting and a little scary both at the same time.
Absolutely.
What that's going to look like, not only for us as well as for kids. We've started talking a little bit with some of our vendors about, control systems. What's AI look like in a control system? What are they doing with that today? What do they think that's going to do in the future? Is AI going to learn the building and set the heat and the air for you? As it learns the occupancy patterns, or is that, right now they can do some of that, but a lot of it's just manually done. They go in and set a schedule as opposed to an AI where it's kind of learning as it goes and adapting. So I'm interested to see what we're going to bring us in the future.
Possibly even more savings.
It's in everything, even procurement. I just got back from a conference where we use AI in procurement.
Yeah.
So, we use it in grant work. I mean, it's here. And so, yeah, it in some ways it's kind of scary. In some ways it's really exciting. A chief once told me that was my teacher is that the world of AI expertise will be needed more than ever.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. When you get the output from AI, you have to know if it's real or good and or brilliant or not. Absolutely. We have to be able to read that. So expertise is going to be even more important for sure. Well, this is exciting. Thanks for sitting down with us today and giving us a view of what Purchase Pros does for districts, Sam, and then the Kentucky facilities supports that in expertise that you bring
Thank you for
to all of the different partners that you serve.
Appreciate it very much.
Thanks.